Hello. Welcome to SHOWstudio. I'm Nick Knight. I'm the director, and I'm this morning with my head of fashion film, Raquel. Good morning,
Hi.
Raquel.
Hi.
So the purpose of this film is to review the fashion film submissions that we get sent at SHOWstudio. We get sent a lot of fashion films from all over the world of varying degrees of interest and quality, but always something exciting to say about them. So hopefully we'll try and do our best. We've got a few fashion films to try and go through this morning. Just a word of, not warning, but perhaps caution. We try and be as positive and constructive of our criticism as possible. We're excited by the films we get sent, and we want to just try in some ways to pass our opinion on them from the viewpoint of SHOWstudio and how we make fashion films at SHOWstudio. Doesn't mean we're right. In fact, quite often we're not. But at least we're trying to express an opinion on what we believe at SHOWstudio makes a good fashion film. So, Raquel, anything to add to that intro?
No, let's go for it.
Okay.
Let's start with the first one. Do you want to intro it or shall I intro it?
You intro it, please.
Okay, so the first film that we have is called Theirs, is by Kathlyn. And shall we watch it a little bit and we can go through it?
Yeah, let's start off watching it and then we'll launch into the commentary. What I was really intrigued with this film is there's a really clever lighting thing going on. And the craft of the film, you know, these shots that we're seeing now are really beautifully lit. And that's something, although it's just part of it, is an important part of fashion filmmaking. Often when I start watching a film, I can tell pretty much straight away how the lighting is going to be throughout and whether the filmmaker, has any talent in that department or is considering that or any skill in that department. And clearly with this film, the filmmaker has. The lighting is beautiful and sensitive and delicate, and actually a very large part of the film. And it's one of those things that, you know, when you see really beautiful lighting, it's part of the craft. You know, like any art has its craft, and you can use it or not. Doesn't mean that all arts have to indulge the craft part of it. But for this fashion film here, the craft seems to be a very large, seductive part of it. And Raquel, anything that you want to sort of bring to this?
Yeah, I actually really like this film. Like you said, I actually really love how it's shot. I think it's really beautifully done. I like all the set pieces, the wide shots, the close-ups are really intense. I think it's all really beautiful. Also, I have a bit of a thing that I don't like cross dissolves on things, but especially there's parts where there's a lot of face cross dissolves. It kind of reminds me of, do you remember the Sarah Moon perfume adverts? It kind of reminds me of that, because I think when it works really nicely. And I think they do work really well in this film, in my opinion. I also really like that it's about makeup, which I always think there's a part of fashion that people don't give enough attention to. This film focused on makeup. So I think is really clever in that way. And makeup is so important in a fashion film because, generally speaking, there's a lot of fashion films that get ruined because of bad makeup.
Yeah, some things will just, as I'm a filmmaker, will put me off. You know, bad hair is one of them. Bad lighting is another one. I couldn't watch Downton Abbey because the lighting was so atrocious.
Yeah.
The skin texture that the filmmakers got on their model is beautiful. And I was really intrigued by the environment that they put them in. I was really intrigued by the model. I thought it was a really, really beautiful casting. And that's often a part of it, which again, you know, I know that not everybody has all the means to make fashion films with the kind of top models of the world. But there are lots of really incredibly beautiful people out there who aren't recognized necessarily as top models, but are still incredibly beautiful. And this is, I think this is an example of that. I guess where the film didn't score for me, and we can be praiseworthy, but also I think it's good to be critical, is it started to meander. And it felt to me that it didn't get to where I hoped it was going to go, and started to slightly feel like it was going a little bit all left, right, and centre, and then didn't quite get there. I don't know what you felt, Raquel.
Yeah, I do think that there's a massive problem that we have with fashion films is that they just drag a little bit. But in the end of the day, maybe that's the intention, because like maybe want people to like experience and stay into it for a long time. And I just think like we're used to see things so fast on the internet and stuff that I think it's hard to keep people's attention for this long with not that much happening.
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. When you're creating any piece of work, whether it's a film or an image or a photograph or whatever, you're capturing people's attention, and then hopefully you're delivering something that that the viewer can start to get excited about and understand, and then take away some energy and excitement from seeing your piece of work. And I think if your piece of work starts to meander a little bit and starts to lose its punch towards the end, then the viewer is going to get bored. And you can acknowledge that and say, well, that's fine, doesn't matter. I want my audience to be more engaged. But I don't, if you've got something to say, then why not say it in a slightly more compelling way? Any other thoughts, Raquel?
No, I think we've been through it. It's good, bad. Let's move to the next one, maybe. Anyway, thank you so much for sending the submission. We really
thank you.
So the next film that we have is from Paul, and the title of the film is Love Lost There to Disturb.
Beautiful. There were some nice touches, I thought, at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
And there was again a sensitivity to light. Yeah, it's London. There was a sensitivity to light. One thing I would be critical of is that typography on what's supposed to be scrawled on the wall in lipstick, as it's clearly exactly the same in every picture and doesn't look like it's got any emotion in it at all. But I like the idea, or what I perceived was the idea of, the mannequin in the window of the shops having life, and this person who is some other sort of mannequin being attracted or interested by them, or sad, or some sort of romance. It was interestingly short, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. No. But I felt if you look at the film and then look at the typography and my problem with it was that it was really, the 6 or 7 awards it might have been nominated for, this huge typeface here, as if it's a kind of sci-fi epic rolling out of Hollywood, was actually the storyline is very beautiful and delicate. And it feels like we're being sort of sold something it isn't by the presentation of it. It's like it's a very Hollywood presentation of an idea which is very beautiful and subtle and really doesn't benefit from the typography. This thing here, Love Again or whatever it is, it doesn't look like anybody's written that. It just feels like it's a stamp. And as I say, that here we are, somebody making a film about a super interesting and very poetic idea, but then let down, in my opinion, by the typography. And I know that's a small thing, but everything counts on a fashion film. Well enough, Raquel, what's your thoughts?
I thought this film was really sweet. I like how short it is. I think it really helps. I also like that it was shot during lockdown, how that is a very specific moment in time. So I think it's really cool to have a film that is from a very specific moment in time where London was completely empty, and you can look back 10 years from now and is going to be from that time. And that's what I really love about it, is it feels in that way very personal. At least we from London, we all relate to that empty Piccadilly Circus. And we also like the idea that there were just mannequins in the stores, but by themselves, no one could get close to them. Because it was really like a ghost town, like when the whole thing hit the first time around, and people wanted to be together, not being able to.
Yeah, but there is something in the sort of zeitgeistness. It's done for a particular moment and makes much more sense at that moment. Yeah. And I like this sort of this use of what in fact are quite cold commercial displays of fashion. There's something particularly unheartwarming about the whole experience of showing fashion in shops. You know, if you walk down Bond Street or Sloane Street, it's brassy, hard. You know, it's a nasty, monetary, commercial, capitalist. You know, there's very little soul in a big shopping street.
Yeah.
On face value, everything's expensive, removed behind windows, etc., etc. So it's a sort of fairly alienating view of society, which is weird because the designers behind a lot of these brands are far from that. They're actually very artistic, but I guess it's money.
Yeah.
So there is something in that, and I love the way that he, and I think it's a he, has has sort of found some poetry in that environment. You know, standing in front of Selfridges or Chanel or Harrods or any of those shops tends not to be a poetic experience. Sometimes, you know, we work with Harrods and we work with Selfridges, and they do try to get across that. But often when you get to the, you know, if you go to a brand only shop on Bond Street or Sloane Street or wherever, you know, there's a very harsh, hard, alienating, you know, you're not coming in here unless you've got money to spend. It's not a very humane approach to life. Yeah. So I think he's done really well to find poetry in that environment, and to try and find some sort of beauty and romance, you know, across the windows and the glass. And this is, you know, without showing a real human being, he's shown a lot of, you know, it's almost getting close to a kind of, you know, a love story here, which is, you know, hard to that environment. Anyway, but I was particularly like the film, and I love the glass statue looking at the fireworks at night, and I love the isolation, and I like the deserted London, and the pathos of the glassy stairs from the mannequins. Yeah, love all that.
Yeah.
Well done.
Cool. So that was us with Paul. So the next one that we're going to see is from Tia, and it's called Mercedes and George. Okay, I think if you don't mind me starting on this a little bit.
No, you go.
I think this film falls into this comedy category on fashion films that is kind of rough for me, just because I'm not a fan of comedy in general. And I think comedy is such a complicated genre, especially to add on to clothes themselves have already so much narrative, and you're supposed to show them and aspire to have them, and to whoever watches the film, that comedy is such a heavy narrative to add to it. So for me, it's always a little bit complicated. Like, I like the awkwardness and the quirkiness of it. I think the grade is actually really lovely. I like the strong colors of like greens and pinks and blues and yellows. I think is really lovely color palette. But for me, it feels very film comedy, you know, very almost like Wes Anderson type film, which is a thing that we see more and more nowadays. I think there's a lot of people going for this genre. People think it really fits fashion film.
Which I, like you, Raquel, I really don't like. There's something, again, in me that I really dislike comedy and fashion mixed together. I don't know what that is. And you know, I'm not a great sort of lover of comedy and fashion. I remember, you know, Giles Deacon saying, everybody loves a comedy frog. And I'm thinking, no, I hate a comedy frog. It's actually everything I dislike. And of course, one should try and love the things one hates. I think it's an interesting, almost sort of ASMR kind of department where we're showing things which are sensitive, both in terms of color and sound, and visual, to try and trigger things within you. So I think in a way I found my dislike and the way that I reacted negatively to the film, perhaps actually one of the positive things about the film, that it was something that was pushing me to do that. And it is very sensitive to those sorts of things.
When you send a film as a fashion film, when it has this really heavy narrative to it, is a comedy, but sometimes you receive a lot of horror type films. I think is a little bit hard because you're adding like so much narrative to the clothes. It almost seems like it's a film with clothes instead of being like a film about garments and showing them through. There are shots that I really like. I think this crop on her legs with the dress, in terms of crops, they're really interesting. The color juxtaposition is really lovely. There's like a lot of good things, but if we have to justify putting like a fashion film on the site that we're really proud of, we would like for the clothes to be one of the main features, whilst I think clothes here help to the narrative, but they weren't the main thing.
I would recommend to Tia that he or she gets, or they get the book that's on there, the Avedon book. Look really closely. If they like Avedon's work, look at how Avedon presented things. Look at how he worked with the same things, the same things as you're doing. That extended leg, all those sorts of things, this view over the shoulders, all super interesting. There are good, interesting camera angles, etc., etc. But look at what Avedon did with the same sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So there are really, really moments of beauty here, but you have to go back to the tension behind a filmmaker. You can tell by the way I'm sort of struggling to find my reasons for wanting to criticize it at the same time wanting to praise. So I think there is real praise needed here. So I think it's a strong film.
So moving on to the next one. The next film that we have is from Chiara and it's called The Little Circus.
Okay, so I thought the film started really well for me. I looked at it when it started coming on my screen. I thought, well, here's somebody that knows a little bit about grading. So that, again, the craft of the film is important to seduce the viewer. I started looking at it and thinking, well, this is an interesting grade. And I thought, well, that model looks great. She looks a bit like a kind of, Arthur Elgort, kind of Peter Lindbergh, kind of early mid-80s. The model looks a bit like a model I used to use, who I loved, called Amanda Cazalet. So there was some real sort of, hook points in straight away for me. And I like the timing on the typography. And then was the effect, which touches the thing. But then it just, for me, descended into effect. And also one thing that, which, as I say, we see over a fashion, at least a fashion from every day sent into us. And one of the things that I always can't work out is why people think it's a good idea to have their female models looking scared. So she suddenly looks like she's full of, here she is. She looks worried, frightened, as if she's running away from something. As she is, and there's always this kind of negative fear not always, often a negative fear on the display of women, as if that brings a sort of pathos to it, or some sort of feeling of anxiety, which we want to try and understand. On a positive side, I liked her understanding of fashion. I liked the way she shot it. I liked the diversity of the fashion in it. But then it seemed to go into effect after effect after effect, not for the benefit of the film. So anyway, Raquel, I'm clearly not in a good mood this morning because I'm being horrible about everybody's film. But hey.
No, I agree with you. I think the grade is really lovely. I actually quite like the music, but every time that we receive a fashion film, we tend to receive like a description with it. And this film has quite a big narrative. And I think that's the main problem that I have with it, is because a fashion film should have like its focus, like at least for us, on the clothes. And again, I think there's like narrative and the clothes are there, but they're not the main drive through it. So it's hard for me to see it as a fashion film. I know how tempting it is to add a lot of effects, but I also know how messy it can get. If you keep on adding, it just looks like you're adding more and more stuff. It just can be very heavy-handed, but effects can work and sometimes work really nice on certain things and sometimes really don't work on other things. That's why it's hard to actually just have a film that feels cohesive. I really like films like Waiting Life and It's Kind of Darkly. So I actually really like the illustrations on top of it, but maybe they don't shine through as much because then there's the glitch, then there's a rotation, then there's the double exposure. And from someone that edits, I know that you can fall into this really quickly. So the next film that we have is called Three Theories of Evil. That's kind of a thing for me to say. And this film is actually by the designer, and I do think that is the Graduation Collection. So let's watch it.
Okay. Good. I was very interested by this film, and I think it proves something which I believe very strongly about fashion film, which is that the clothes have to be the narrative. And I think because if this film is made by the designer who made the clothes, which I believe, Raquel, is that the case?
I think so, yeah. I think it's their Graduation Collection.
Okay. You can sort of feel an understanding of the clothes and how they're supposed to be worn and what they're supposed to propose. I thought it all, apart from I think the clothes are super interesting. I just felt this is a fashion film because I'm being shown fashion. I'm being shown clothes in movement. That's, in a way, the simplest form of fashion film. But on top of that, the person who's made the film has done this really, what I think is quite interesting juxtaposition between, these sort of huge outer scale backgrounds and the person in the studio. And I think that quite brutal juxtaposition is very effective. And in a way, it becomes quite artistic. And I get sort of, flashes of Cindy Sherman again. And there's something that, artistically seems to work without taking away from the clothes. So for me, this works very well as a fashion film. And I also incidentally really like the soundtrack.
I love it. I love the juxtaposition on the background right now. I think it looks so beautiful with like the purple textures of the jacket. But I have a thing that I actually, when there's presentation of clothes, I always love to see details. And I love the clothes. I think they're so well done. And I think they're so impressive that I would actually love to get a little bit closer. And I know sometimes it happens on the background, but I really want to see if it was me then I was editing this. I would love to cut to maybe a detail of the glove with maybe a background on the still on the green screen, so you can have a closer and so they're more palpable, the clothes. Because I feel like when it's this far away, sometimes they just feel a little too far, and I want to be able to see them more. And that is how I would go at it if I was editing it. I would just show some closer details than with the green screen background still on it, so it still fits within the whole thing. But it's obviously a personal thing. This eye here, I really like it.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the color palette's really good. You can see the sensitivity.
Yeah.
The person that made the clothes is in the filmmaking too. There is something, that's the same world. It's coherent. The slight oddness of the poses go completely with the slight oddness of the clothes. So, I think it's what it is. I think it's great. It's actually showing you great clothes in movement. If I wanted to make it better, and it's only better in terms of how I would do it, not in terms of anybody, you need to make those clothes work a little bit more. But I don't want to take away from this film. But for instance, in the last filmmaker, Chiara, was it? I'd be really interested to see what Chiara did with these clothes. Yeah. In a way, it's a bit what her film is missing. Her film is a little bit let down by the fact that the fashion doesn't live up to her vision and her expectation. If you've got somebody who looks like this person in front of us now, there's a whole set of kind of narratives going off inside your head of what they are and what it looks like, what they're supposed to be, what the designer, which bring worlds to the viewer. And that's what I think when people can't get hold of great fashion, where it falls down, because they're not managing to bring the fantasy and the narrative which is in these clothing to their film, because they haven't got the clothing.
Next one,
we should hurry because we're
next one is called Restituição, and it's by Odd. I'm probably butchering the
I
name.
love the fact that neither of us know how to pronounce his name, so I've left it to you to pronounce.
I know, me, the Portuguese kid. Oh, great. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name.
Let me pronounce Raquel's surname. It's not good either. We're good to talk?
Yes. You start.
I start, okay. I just was really taken with this film. I didn't know what it was, obviously, when it first came on, so I started just trying to understand it by watching it. And I was just really super convinced by the whole thing. I thought it felt very genuine in its poetry and its emotions. And there's a beautiful melancholy here. Remembering a little bit what I read about it, but one shouldn't go from what one reads, one should go from what one sees for these films. That it is about a sort of adorning of sexuality and coming to terms with your sexual and gender preferences and gender, how you want to be and how you feel you should be. And I think the sensitivity in that and the references to childhood and discovering fashion, how fashion can take you somewhere else and express who you are more as a person, I thought was so beautifully portrayed. I think that, sometimes you're looking for something that wins you over in a film or turns you off. And just really early on, there was one scene, I think, where it's just so beautifully shot this. There's one scene where the person just goes really macro and picks a flower or presses a flower right at the beginning. It's just very nicely seen. And I just thought it's so delicately filmed. It's sensitive. It doesn't feel fake. It feels very heartfelt and very real. I love the gentleness of the camera work, but the poignance, that's the shot. I just love that. Straight away, once I saw that shot, I thought this person can really see. And I love the fact that it appears to be, this person's father or somebody asleep, and then, the child is just gently dancing in such a beautiful way. There was something of their own little world, and growing up in families and the tolerance that you expect and desire from your families to understand your development and your sexual orientation and your gender and all those sorts of things, which often is or certainly has been in the past, a reason for conflict within families. And anyway, I felt it dealt with a whole lot of issues in a very gentle, poetic, and totally heartfelt way. I loved it.
Yeah, me too.
Good.
I think the makeup is great. The styling is fantastic. The way it's filmed is beautiful and delicate. I love the grade. I love the hair. I love all the clothes. Again, it seems like I really love this film. I think it feels very personal and it has a really delicate touch.
Yeah, and I think it does become a fashion film because the fashion is so crucial to the understanding of what this is about and how this person's expressing themselves and what they love. And it's actually, as now I say, it's actually three people. But the fashion is very provocative here, but it's sensitive. Can't speak today. It's seen in a very sensitive way.
Yeah, and it also has like a crescendo. Like it doesn't stagger. It actually takes you somewhere. So now they come together and then they go outside. So instead of being just confined to their own space, it's more of a liberation moment. So I think the whole thing takes you somewhere. Also love the makeup so much. Right now.
Hooray.
Okay, cool. So the next film, it's called The Sound of Waves and is by Vitor.
Start talking the real. Yes, you're gonna have people turn their backs, but it's time for us to keep it real. Just keep talking that real, bro. Do what you do. I know what you do. To keep doing that. Talk the real. Talk the things, them.
The GP will see you now.
Look, I don't want to cause no problems. I just want to live my life, but I keep on hearing about nonsense. Me and my dons ain't mobsters, but when you see imposters.
Okay, Raquel, you want to go first or me go first? You go first.
I think we're going to have different ideas about this one.
I know.
I can go first. even though it has a lot of effects and ways of editing, everything is really cohesive. Everything actually gels together for me. I love films that cut on the beat, that drive you along. It feels very almost like Nike, like just do it, something like that. The editing is really good. The grade is good. I like the model, so I really like it personally. What about you, Nick?
I would agree with 75% of what you say, other than one maybe. But I thought it was really well put together. The craft of it is really good. What is there not to like with huge waves crashing and the scenes on the ocean? And there's the famous Lachtig picture of a man with a crashing wave, in front of him, just like that, etc. There's some really beautiful cinematography going on here. I really loved that girl. I don't know who she is or what part of the film she's in. I really did not like the main model. I just felt he was very unpoetic, whereas everything around him, including the other models, is super poetic.
But besides the casting, that we're going to disagree on that, because I think he's a Spanish model. Like, I grew up seeing him. I didn't grow up seeing him, but I think he's more familiar to me that maybe he would be to you. So he doesn't come across as so different to me. But also what I really love is sometimes I find frames when you make a film like 16:9 really constrictive. And I love the idea that people start breaking from that format, and whatever frame your film feels better is almost like presenting a picture, maybe presenting a still, whatever the frame fits is whatever the image is going to be. And I really like that detail. I really like how everything now can actually adjust, and people are not just constrained to that really awkward long format. I think is really good.
Well, anyway. It's sort of just on that point. I think it's because now we're seeing films we're not just seeing them in the cinema or just on television. We're seeing them on our phones, our laptops, and on digital billboards, and in all over the place. So you don't have to be stuck to one sort of format.
Yeah, I like how it keeps on changing. Is literally like, this is the best frame to present this still, so this is what we're gonna do. I think that's great. Okay, so next film, it's by Xang. It's called The Disillusionment of Roman. Blah, 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 blah. I'm sorry. I'm Portuguese and dyslexic. I'm so sorry.
I haven't got that excuse, so I can't.
Next time you do the names and titles, please.
No, I'll leave that to you. Okay. Do you want to go first? Or you want me to go first?
I went first last time. Now it's your turn.
Oh, okay. All right. So, interesting. I was intrigued watching this film. It's got some really great moments in it, and it has got some of those moments in the previous film I was saying, where they go close up to pick the flower. And I can show you the moment where I became convinced in a positive way. There's one frame, I think. I think it was that last one. It was that one back. When that frame, I just thought, there's something really beautiful there. And when you see a frame like that, you just kind of get sucked in, you get convinced. It's almost like it gets a sort of tick somewhere in my mind. It's like, oh, this is interesting. There are some frames which are not as good that come afterwards. Let's get this playing again, Michael, so we can talk. So I was looking at, and then that happens, and then this happens, and I just thought, that's it. There's something interesting going on here, and it started firing off. Sometimes when you see a piece of work, you imagine what you might have done with it in this situation, and they kept, no, that's a beautiful shot. There kept being stuff in there. I was thinking, that's clever, that sort of works, but could it have gone further? I really like the model. I really like. There's so many clothes being shown here. So in that way, a great fashion film. So there's a lot of fashion in it. It felt to me like it needed some stronger art direction. When I learnt photography, fashion photography, I had the luck, the privilege to have great art directors near me. One of them was a chap called Mark Ascoli, who would look at the photographs I was taking in the studio And he was very tough. So he'd be very kind of critical. He wouldn't be easy to win over. Literally, I'd start showing him pictures at sort of 11 o'clock in the morning, and I'd still be on the same first shot by sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon, waiting for his approval. I would just come and look in the camera and just go, not interested, or it's not good, or looks like somebody else's work, or really, or, so you had to win him over. And I think that taught me to really look inside myself to try and get things to be better. And I think sometimes when you see filmmakers like this, you think, well, here's the beginning of some things. If they had that's beautiful. If they had a Mark Ascoli next to them, he would say this, and this to him. Yes, there's a fantastic idea there. Don't lose it. Hold on to that idea. It becomes really exciting. But then you go to quite banal shots, and I've sort of lost the excitement again. It's that thing, you see something which feels really kind of, I'm excited by this, but then you lose it.
I completely agree with you. I think their shots are absolutely amazing, and ideas that are outstanding, but then there's other things that become a little bit banal. Also, just a little thing, again, I edit, so is a little thing of mine. When you show things, don't repeat them. So I think that you should always show something new and something exciting. So if you show a garment, it doesn't matter how good or bad it is. If you show a garment and then throughout the film you keep on showing it, it's going to feel a little bit repetitive, I feel. Unless you have something really clever on the edit there that it brings you back to it. If you keep on showing the same shot that you show at the beginning, you lose a little bit of traction when it comes to editing, because you've seen it, a minute later you're seeing it again. So you're just repeating yourself a little bit. Totally. That is just a little bit of my editing thoughts on it.
It's really good editing thoughts. Imagine you're making a series of pictures for a magazine. They're giving you a 12-page story in whatever magazine you want to be in. So you're really excited about it. You're only going to show one dress once.
Yeah.
So the first page you will show the, whatever it is, the Gucci dress. Second page you'll show the Saint Laurent dress. Third page you'll show the Guarascio dress, etc., etc. You don't go back and show some more pictures of the Gucci dress. That's it. So find your best shot and make that really count and make it really work. There are some lovely shots in that orangey dress, which has got the 4 on the screen.
Yeah.
But there are some moments that you touch on here which clearly show your potential as a fashion filmmaker. This is great, but why isn't the whole film there? Maybe you've got somebody next to you saying, and you've got to show that piece of clothing again because I love it. I don't know. Who knows how these things come about? We've all got difficult clients, and all got people who kind of give us advice that we'd rather not hear.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard because sometimes you do have clients next to you saying, I want this fashion film, but I want to see the dress from the front, from the back. And sometimes it's just complicated too.
Yeah.
Juggle everything. So Nick, what's our next film?
Our next film is directed by 2 people, it appears, Duran Manis and Valentine Dardel. It's for a fashion designer who is called Valentine Dardel. Let's have a watch and see what we think.
I really enjoy this film. I do think it's beautifully done. I love some of the visuals here. It feels super delicate. You see the texture of the clothes, they become this surreal kind of experience. I think is really, really beautifully done. My only criticism on it is that I think it drags a little bit, because at some point it just becomes like beautiful imagery over beautiful imagery. You just need a few of those. You don't need like a full 30 seconds of those. But I think it's absolutely stunning. I love this film personally.
Yeah, I kind of probably agree with all of that. There is something very seductive in this dress and with this projection on it, and it works. And it's a nice fashion moment. It's a good fashion moment. It's good to see it, fashion film moment. It's good to see it moving. It's good to, the music was actually very uplifting throughout it. It's just pleasant. It's just agreeable to watch. I don't need to get any more from that. It's just in the same way that if you saw a great fashion photograph, you go, oh, that's beautiful, and then you probably move on. And that's a bit what I'm feeling here. I really liked it. I thought it was worked perfectly in all the senses of a fashion film. Shows a great piece of fashion in movement, well filmed, well seen. It's a moment in that way. And it's just something that in a way is all a fashion film needs to be, just in the same way in a photograph doesn't need to be anything other than one vision of a dress or one vision of a suit or whatever it is. It's just something that they've seen that way. I can see what they're proposing here, and it's very nice. I felt it was an enjoyable experience watching it, and it went on a fraction too long. But if I saw it on a billboard somewhere, a digital billboard, or I saw it presented as a sort of 15-second ad, it's beautiful. You take away beauty and interest for it. You want to know who Valentine Dardel is. It's lovely. So enough. We don't need any more from it than that, and that's good enough. And that's, as you can tell, actually quite hard to achieve.
Our next film is Be Named by Simone. Just let's watch.
My name is Alham. Back home in Tunisia, it was given to me by my father. The concept of name is strange. It's handed out at birth, and you're supposed to carry it with you for the rest of your life.
Where should we start, Raquel?
So I actually think is super delicate. I feel it feels fairly personal. When we send fashion films, I want fashion to be the main thing that drives it. And this feels a little bit too much on the narrative side for me to consider it a fashion film. I would consider this more of a short film, but I wouldn't consider it a fashion film. And I think that is the problem. I think it's a really great short film, but I wouldn't personally say it's a fashion film. Even though the casting is great and the clothes look great, I just don't think there's enough there that is not the story to call it a fashion film. But that is just my opinion. But it's a great short film. I think it's beautiful.
I tend to agree with you there. I don't even feel qualified to judge properly your film because it's not a fashion film for me, and therefore I'm not a film director in that sense or filmmaker in that sense that understands film in that way. So do said in your films where we will try and understand it as best we possibly can, but do please think, we are a fashion film site looking for fashion film directors and trying to define what that genre is, what that medium is. It's a new medium and it needs defining. The lovely thing about it is it hasn't been defined yet. You can still define it. It hasn't all been done. It's one of the few mediums which has just recently been invented. Anyway, that should bring us on to the next film, which is also super interesting in a different way.
Yes. So our next film, that is also our final film, is called The Butterfly Dream by Eugene, and is a CGI film. I think there's something really cool about like this 3D space where like clothes exist. What really shines for me in this film is I actually think the clothes look really good, and you can actually, they feel really palpable, and I can see how they look in real life. Sometimes with CGI films, you don't get that impression, but I think the clothes here actually really shine through in terms of like, you can see how they will look realistically. I also think some of the visuals are really great.
Well, I mean, it's something which is probably we're starting to see at last, a real new step in visuals. This doesn't look like anything from sort of prior to 2000. I'm being generous there. This is a new visual landscape with new uses and new stars and new people and new. Everything's kind of being discovered here. So as much as fashion film is new as a medium, probably about 20 years old, this kind of CGI animation is really, really new too, and it's going hand in hand with a sort of a shift where people are seeing their visuals these days. So they're not seeing them in magazines, they're seeing them on their phones, and they're seeing them on screens. And therefore you need something which is appropriate for that. You know, we're involved in a lot of CGI at SHOWstudio, and a lot of work has always been going on for 3D animation, and it's, making a fashion film is hard. Making a great film in CGI is really hard too. I made one for Burberry last year. We had a virtual Kendall Jenner. There's a whole bunch of new skills to be learned, and a whole bunch of new players, a whole bunch of new people doing things before, and it's for different destinations. This clothes might not, Raquel, you're saying they might they look like you'd want to wear them in real life. You might also want to wear them digitally.
Yeah.
And that's a whole new world that's opening up really, really fast. I thought that the invention of the internet was a huge cultural change. I think what we're seeing with this idea that we can have a digital life is even bigger, and pertains to a whole bunch of really new ideas and new ways of looking at ourselves as a species. You've got to also couple this with the rise of the rise or the emergence of AI as an evolutionary step. So there's some really huge topics being proposed in this world and by this fashion film. So if you imagine if this person could speak to you, or this person was you, or this person you could interact with, or you could look like that, or that could be your vision, and you could do just as fulfilling things, now just as fulfilling relationships online. I mean, anybody who games, or anybody who spends a lot of time interacting with other people online will know that it's actually, that is something that's very achievable. So, this is a big subject, and that's a real understatement.
I can't wait until I live in a time where Ready Player One is actually reality instead of just a film. Yeah.
Next year, Raquel, I think.
I know. But yeah, the visuals are great. The music is great. I think we're always so excited to see like CGI films where you think there's such a step forward. And with this, we're done. This was our last film, Nick.
Lovely. Well, thank you all for watching. I hope our criticism and our advice is well taken, as it's certainly well meant. We really want to see new fashion films, and we want people to really kind of, use SHOWstudio as a platform to showcase their talents, and we're very much here for you to do that. So please keep sending stuff in to us. We're really happy to see it. Do try and think we're looking for fashion filmmakers. So bear that in mind. All right.
That's your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you, Nick.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.